Hi everyone, my name is Vince Gauman. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to be here in the great outdoors, rain and all. And I want to highlight what's happening more and more in the world right now in this collective initiation, this collective awakening that we're in. And that is people are recognizing slowly but surely that they cannot trust their outer authorities, our outer authorities. People are going, you know what? Given all the information that's coming out, the contradictory information, the conflicting information, the information that just is increasingly not sitting well in my heart, in my inner knowing, something's not right, and I'm not too sure if I can keep trusting these people, these elected and unelected officials, leaders, so-called leaders. I don't know if I can keep trusting these authorities that I once, believed in. So here's the opportunity, here's the doorway that's now opening, and that is as people are questioning the outer authorities and finding it harder and harder to have faith in them and to grant power to them, what they're having to do now is to turn to their inner authority. See, this is the awakening, is as we realize we cannot trust outer, higher authority, we are now being given the opportunity, we're being called, forced in many ways to turn towards and trust and live from our inner higher authority. See, that's what initiations are about. Initiation is about bowing to higher authority within. And it actually, in many cases, such as in the ancient mystery school traditions, or in indigenous rites of passage, you are walking away. You're sequestering yourself. You're leaving the authorities. You're going away for a while to isolate so that you do not get distracted, so that you do not succumb to any old patterns of giving your power away to others. And so that you can be humbled into a degree of powerlessness, which is really the defeating of the ego. And in that powerlessness, you come in touch with your true power. See, that is the blessing of powerlessness, is that in a sense of powerlessness, in confronting powerlessness, we open the doorway to true power. That's surrender. In surrendering my personal will, I'm able to open to higher will. I'm able to consecrate my lower will to divine will. So what we have now is an initiation, and the dark forces are doing a damn good job at supporting this because they're making themselves more and more known. They're making their power agendas more clear, more obvious. It's an initiation for us to turn towards and have faith in and grant power to our higher authority within, so much of which has been ignored in this lifetime. Now, this is scary for people to various degrees, and the reason is because there's lots of baggage attached to turning away from external authority and honoring your inner authority, honoring your inner authenticity. There's lots of baggage, there's lots of fear, and truth, there's lots of terror. That's a better word, is terror, and I'm going to explain why now. So let's go to childhood trauma. Let's understand the nature of childhood trauma, and specifically in the context of attachment theory and attachment-based trauma. You likely know, or maybe you don't know, I don't know, but you might know that if a child has to choose between being authentic and maintaining some semblance of attachment or bond with their primary caregivers, they choose attachment. they choose attachment. If they have to choose between authenticity and attachment, even if attachment is not that secure, but some semblance of safety, some semblance of love, they choose attachment. So it is a biological survival imperative wired in us as children to sacrifice who we are, and that includes our innocence, our imagination, our wonder, our curiosity, and our emotional body, to sacrifice that for some semblance of attachment. What is the underlying emotion that has us do that? It's fear, if not terror. So we give up ourselves. We give up our inner authority for outer authority, the authority of our parents or primary caregivers or primary attachment figures. We give up our inner authority as children, which is big. If you spend time with children, you know how huge their authority is. Just look at how wonderfully they say no. No! how completely unafraid they are to ask for what they need, what they want. Give me this, I want this. They don't even say please, right? They're not afraid to dance. They're not afraid to sing. They're not afraid to scream. They're not afraid to cry. They're not afraid to dream big dreams, to be bold, big, brash, brave, wonderfully huge. That's a lot of inner authority, isn't it? That's a lot of inner authority. That's a lot of inner fire. That's a lot of inner fire that we soon learn to quell, to dim. We dim down that inner light, that inner heat, that brightness, that soul power, that soul essence, our innocence. Innocence means in essence, the essence of who we are. We give that up to some degree because it's not safe to be that. It's not safe to own our inner authority. We give it up for outer authority because it's too much or not enough. It's just not safe to be that. We're not going to get the love we want if we continue being too imaginative. Our parents are telling us to be more realistic. We're not going to get the love and the safety and the recognition that we long for if we're too curious because our parents are telling us to stop asking so many questions. We're not going to get the love and the safety by feeling the big emotions that we need to feel because we haven't developed the capacity to self-regulate yet at that young age. Because our parents are saying, stop crying, or stop being a sissy. So you understand that what we have to do to survive all that is we have to deny, walk away from our inner authority. We have to deny and walk away from who we authentically are to fit in. To fit in. In other words, we have to be a certain way. And I've said this before, and I'm just going to repeat it because it's so important. We have to be a certain way now. We can't be that way, which is instinctual and natural. We have to be a certain way, such as smart, good, nice, pleasing, strong, athletic, meek, quiet, wallflower. We have to be a certain way, tough. We have to be a certain way. This is the adaptation. So now we're adapting. Like a tree that adapts to reach the light, it bends. So now the child has to bend. It has to bend, adapt. It has to morph, change in order to get whatever safety and love they can get from their primary caregivers. So in other words, they have to be a certain way to be certain that they're not going to get hurt emotionally or physically. If they have to be a certain way to make sure they're more certain of their safety. Underneath this, depending on how extreme the environment is is fear, if not terror. If not terror. Okay, remember, this is a survival adaptation. We're talking about survival here because attachment is a survival instinct. Children need to have a safe bond. Without that safe bond, without that secure attachment, if they don't have it with either parent, it is like a death. It's what we call an unbearable aloneness. Does that sound familiar to you? That you felt an unbearable aloneness as a child? It's tough on a kid when one parent does that. But if another parent can provide that nourishing support, if that other parent can be a protector, that makes a world of difference if that other parent stands up for them and protects them and gives them the safe space for them to be who they are. But when both parents do it, and I've seen that with my clients in my healing practice, I've heard their stories when both parents deny them, when both parents don't make it safe for them to be who they are. It is like a death. And then there is what is called, and rightly called, an unbearable aloneness. So it is a survival instinct driven by fear, if not terror, to adapt, to be a certain way, to therefore make certain of their surroundings, of their safety, to make certain they get some level of love or recognition. Okay, so now that you understand that, this is pervasive in society. It is pervasive, the survival pattern. People do not realize how much they are living from and identified with these survival adaptations. See, these adaptations to become good, nice, pleasing, obedient, smart, tough, etc. They become so identified with that, it becomes a personality. And remember, personality, it comes from the word persona, which in Greek means mask. So they become identified with this adaptation. And so someone who is, for instance, if they adapted by becoming a really good caretaker, they became a real good harmonizer because they wanted to harmonize their environment to feel safe. They want to harmonize their home environment in order to feel safe. If they were taking care of other people's needs, being like a responsible little adult at the age of 6. So they adapted, morphed into being a caretaker. So what happens is someone like that may get a job as a caretaker in their adult life. They make a profession out of their adaptation. They make a profession out of their adaptation, and therefore they become a nurse or a social worker or a childcare professional. If someone adapted by becoming very tough because they knew that's what then they would get some sort of attention from their father by being tough. They may become a police officer, or if it's really smart, it's about becoming smart to get parents' approval, then they may become an academic. So if we look at the word approval, it has the word prove in it. So if I want to get approval, I need to prove myself, but now we're bending like that tree. I need to become someone. I need to be a certain way. How many times have you heard athletes say, I got something to prove? How many athletes, professional athletes, are driven by a core belief that they're not enough? And what happens to someone who heals, who's a professional athlete, who starts doing their inner work and they're healing the wounds around not being enough? I would bet you a lot of them, if not all of them, would find it harder and harder to compete. They just wouldn't care as much anymore whether they won or lost. It would just be more about the joy of the game. That's what happened to me when I started healing my pain around not being enough. I simply didn't care anymore whether I let in a goal or not as a goalie in soccer. It's actually one of the key things that drove me away from sports, is I just didn't care anymore. It didn't matter. So let's cycle back to the original point of what's going on in the world right now. We have a world full of people who are being forced in many ways, or at least invited, to turn from outer authority and to choose inner authority, inner higher authority. But you see, in that, there's an inner conflict. There's an old fear that arises. Is it safe to choose myself? Is it safe to be me? Because remember, there's an old story in us from childhood that says it's not safe, because if I'm me, I get punished in some way. If I'm me, then I'm punished, I'm too much, I'm not enough, I get neglected, I may get abused. So we're dealing with a world full of people who are increasingly being forced to make this decision. That's the blessing of this global drama that we're in. That's the blessing of the dark forces increasingly making themselves obvious as they are. Because in a way, they're forcing people to recognize how corrupt and abusive they are, and thereby forcing people to choose themselves. See, this is the blessing. So we can look at what's going on in the world and say, is it good or is it bad? Is it up or is it down? So it's a very difficult initiation, especially if you lack awareness, why people are being so obedient, so willing to do what they're being told by the authorities, so willing to submit, so willing to be good, so willing to believe in all these so-called safety measures, is because they're still acting out their survival patterns of having to be good and obedient, of giving up their inner authority for outer authority. You see, they're still acting out that survival pattern. So if you want to know why people just don't get it, and boy, I'm sure you've asked yourself many times, how can people not see the truth of what's happening? It's because they're confronted with this unconscious, they're dealing with an unconscious, unprocessed survival adaptation that has them give their power away to others, sacrifice authenticity for the relationship, for the other. I created a video about a year ago. It was called Defended Against Our Own Truth. We defend the perceived truths of those in power. Defended against our own truth, we defend the perceived truths of those in power. So what happens when we start doing our inner work, when we start healing the defenses around our heart? When we start healing the inner defenses that have protected us from our pain, and going into that pain and transmuting that pain and loving that pain, what happens when we no longer are defended against our own heart and our own truth is that we become more undefended inside, is that it becomes more and more obvious what's happening in the outer world, and therefore it becomes harder and harder to defend those in power. We see it for what it is. We see it for what it is. And so this is a deeper look, and I hope this is making sense for you, making sense to you. This is a deeper look at what's actually happening. This is one perspective. It's not the only way of looking at what's happening, but it is one perspective of understanding why people are being so quick to bow and be obedient and to not question, to simply be agreeable. Because we had to be agreeable to survive. And I also want to say that this is bigger than just this lifetime. We are also carrying memories from previous lifetimes where it was of huge consequence for us to be in our power, where we were punished, tortured, killed for being in our truth. Those memories can linger in our cells now, in our DNA now, and they can impact us now. They can have influence on us. They can make us hesitant to be in our truth. We also carry the imprints from our ancestry, which influences as well. And of course, there's all the pressure, the social pressure that people experience to be good, to fit in. Remember, we were trained in many ways, conditioned to fit in, not stand out, to fit in. So already within the family system, we are forcing ourselves, by sacrificing our authenticity, we're forcing ourselves to fit in a certain way. And fitting in is very different than belonging. Fitting in means giving up aspects of yourself. Then we're put into the standardized education system. And when you standardize a soul, a unique soul, you are now further getting them to fit in. So again and again, in many ways, from cradle to grave, we are conditioned to give up who we are for something outside of us. And so this initiation is a huge opportunity, a difficult one. It's an invitation, and it's a forcing in many ways. It's a pressure system for us to say, I've had enough. I'm going to now sacrifice the relationship for my authenticity. You see, empowerment occurs when you reverse it. Empowerment and healing occur when you reverse it. I'm no longer going to sacrifice myself for the relationship. I'm going to sacrifice the relationship for my authenticity. I'm going to sacrifice outer authority for inner authority. This is what happens when a person walks away from an abusive relationship. They're no longer willing to sacrifice who they are for the relationship, for the attachment, for the seeming attachment. Now they're going to sacrifice the relationship for themselves. We reverse it. But to do that, what happens? We have to face fear. Fear is going to surface because, is it safe to be me? The old fears from childhood, the old fears from previous lifetimes. Is it safe to be me? Is it safe for me to be in my authority? Is it safe for me to say no? Is it safe for me to say yes? Is it safe for me to walk my own path? Which is what all spiritual teachers, all great sages and avatars have taught us to do, is to walk our own path. To be willing to be different, to stand out, to be outstanding, which is why enlightened people tend to stand outside of the mainstream. So this is our collective initiation. This is our collective opportunity now to claim our inner authority, to walk away from the outer authorities that are deeply, deeply destructive, perverted, dark, abusive, coercive, manipulative. And they're doing us a favor in many ways, like I said, because they are making it harder and harder for us to not see their games. That's the blessing. So in a way, by them amplifying and amplifying and amplifying their coercive tactics, their abusive tactics, the games themselves that they're playing are going to destroy the games. The games themselves are going to destroy the games. So no matter what, it's not going to go down, 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 down. We are awakening as a people, but we can accelerate our awakening by claiming our inner authority, by bowing, surrendering, saying yes to our inner higher authority, our higher self, our higher knowing, our inner dignity, our integrity, our sovereignty, the truth of who we are. So thank you, everyone. That was a lot. I hope you received it well. Please share, please like, please share your comments. Click notifications. I have some upcoming online ceremonies that you may be interested in for healing and awakening. I'm going to put the links in the description. and the sun seems to be coming out a bit, and I'm going to enjoy some nature. So thank you. Take good care.